Yes, it is very important to be able to walk the very thin line of correctness in Hong Kong, because the only place in the world in which political correctness has, in my opinion, certain merit and reason for existence is Greater China. Because we want to keep on living with comfort.
Correct. Yes.
You guys were just saying about how we are back to the realization of living in a very nice city that is very comfortable. And even though a lot of people had the fantasy of living the city, I was the first one.
Yeah, we've all had that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go anywhere, man.
You're like, then you take the MTR again, and then you're like, oh no, this is pretty good. Right?
Land in the airport, get to the city, get to your home in like an hour, which is crazy. So be sure that I'm gonna clip this part and I'm gonna tag Hong Kong government and John Lee, because he says that we need to tell good stories about Hong Kong.
True. So we can get Taylor Swift here, right?
Maybe we should get Taylor Swift in the podcast.
I actually have a number, and I'm seeing when she can come. Your schedule is very busy, though.
Yeah, I can make an exception for her, though. Yeah, I'll move around the trips. It's very funny to observe how certain media outlets are walking this dangerous path of informing people in Hong Kong. For me, this is a potential guest for the podcast, the editor of Hong Kong Free Press.
I know him.
He's amazing. The guy with the red hair.
Yeah.
Because if you see how he narrates the reality, he's very smart into not putting himself in a vulnerable position, even though he's the only one making difficult questions. So even though we have never talked in person, hats off to you, because I think it's very difficult and courageous, because I'm sure that some people will try to press his buttons. Anyway, guys, as I said before, welcome to the last meeting of the week. Normally we were supposed to do this on a Friday, but we are flexible and fluid and versatile, and it's Sunday, so you can.
It's Friday somewhere. No, it's not Friday somewhere in the world anymore.
No, not anymore. No, but maybe a few hours ago it was. This is also a podcast that had to be done long time ago. I think we were scheduled for November, something like that. But then I was sick. And actually, as I said before yesterday, in our call, I'm very happy because I believe we have improved quite a bit. We've solved a few glitches of the workflow, and we feel more comfortable and have more fun doing what we're doing. And at the beginning, even though we have a lot of friends in common, and I know your wife, and I've Filippo has talked to me about you, it's the first time we see each other face to face. So I prefer that the lab rats were actually my friends that I love and I thank for the first 5 episodes. But now we're here, and you have a lot of things that I'm interested in. We share, as far as I know, 2 big interests: aerospace and sustainability. A lot of people don't know this because it's been so long ago that I forget about it. But when I had to write my final thesis on the uni, I wrote it about feasibility of mini aeolic installations. And it was a heartbreaking study, because at the end of the day, the conclusion was, with this legal frame, is never going to happen in Spain. And I don't think the legislation changed there. But for me, it was the only different line that one could take in the industry, apart from just designing things that flew farther away, faster, consuming less, which is pretty much, and have more people in it, which is what you want on an airplane. So we're going to talk about sustainability a lot, which is also a very difficult topic, because there is a lot of there is in my opinion, a super important base to define, to understand, and to even try to push and defend. But then on top of that, there is a big layer of BS or bullshit, because I don't care about the algorithm canceling my videos, which by the way they have already, but that's a different topic. And I want to debunk some of these myths. Disclaimer: if I ask some difficult questions and I appear to be skeptical, it will be because I want to put myself in the chair of that person that doesn't believe, that really only perceives the bullshit and cannot see through the real possible solutions and the importance of the topic, because I think it would be important to try to get to the core of it. But before anything else, and without any more delay, I want to introduce to you Oliver HAAS. Oliver HAAS. Thank you for being here.
OLLIE HAAS.
OLLIE HAAS.
Oliver's
Sorry.
only the name I get used that is used when I get told off, like by my mom or by my wife. So
also your wife.
Yes.
Your wife. Okay, Ollie. Sorry. It's a very
good.
It's a very cool name, Oliver. I always like the name Oliver. There was these cartoons from Japan. Do you remember Benji and Oliver? Yes, Capitan Tsubasa. And for me, Oliver was the coolest name since I was maybe 3 years old.
Really? Wait, I don't know this cartoon.
The football one.
Yeah, that they used in which the field was this shape, the shape of a hill. They were running, and they ran for 10 kilometers, and they finally score a goal, but they don't, and it was always very passionate. Anyway,
I'm gonna have to check this out. So this is what carries the coolness of my name, is this Japanese show.
Yes, and I like it so much that actually my daughter's name is Olivia, which is very close.
Sweet.
Yes,
Nice.
and I call her Ollie too.
Good name.
So
Yes.
Anyway, how have you been, Oliver?
Good. No, I'm super happy to be here. As said, we were meant to do this in November, I guess. And then got sick, life happened, Christmas, all the stuff. But I've super been looking forward to it. Like, for the listeners, right, we've had this WhatsApp stream going and always trying to find that little time. And then when we finally found the moment, I think we all jumped up and we're like, yes, okay, good. Sunday it is. So I'm super happy to be here. Yeah.
Good. So before anything else, I think it would be very constructive if you just told everyone who you are a little bit, where you come from, what is your background, in order to, let's say, channel the story and the questions going from that.
Sounds good. Yeah. So thanks for that. And let me just say once again, I like doing this. Thanks for having me here, guys. I think I love what you're doing. I've talked a lot already as we were just preparing for this, how much I love the creator movement. We can talk about that more, but I just love being in this space, and I love what you guys are doing. Okay, so my story, let's see. My name is Ollie. I like long walks on the beach. No, that's not how I'll start. I'll start that I'm half Austrian and half Ugandan. And this is a very kind of defining part of my story. I guess, I was fortunate enough always to live and grow up with a perspective of two very different parts of the world. But also to understand that those two parts of the world are very similar sometimes, right? One very defining thing to explain about me is that I have been obsessed by planes since I was like 5 years old. I always wanted to be a pilot. And then I started getting a little bit more interested and conscious of what I sort of call bigger picture issues and opportunities in the world, sustainability things, international development. That became my focus really in sort of university and of high school. And then for a long time, this was like, I still today am the world's biggest hypocrite, because I loved planes. Like, the 5-year-old in me loved planes, and I started caring a lot about sort of sustainability and bigger things. And it took me much longer than I'd admit to understand that actually I can bring those two things together.
Yep.
And that's sort of very much what, kind of my career and also a big part of my life is focused on right now, is really exploring that intersection between sustainability and aviation. And to round myself out as not just a work introduction, I love old school hip hop, I love colorful shirts, and I love every form of carbohydrate.
It is who do you choose? Let's start with controversial questions. Who do you choose, Notorious B.I.G. or Tupac?
This is a very controversial question. I'm generally a little bit more a fan of West Coast hip hop, but I'll give both kings their respect. I'm a diplomat too.
Come on, you need to choose one at least.
I'll choose.
Otherwise,
I'll
otherwise,
choose Biggie.
no
I'll
one is
choose
gonna.
Biggie in this case. I'll choose Biggie in this case.
Can I say something? I could have. I can take your answer and do copy and paste and say the same thing. I'm super West Coast, actually, because I lived in LA when I was little.
Yeah.
But Tupac was a badass, was an alpha male. But if you just close your eyes and listen to the lyrics, Notorious was the shit, man. It's a different story. It's just different fucking level. You said two things that before we get into aviation and the hypocrisy, because I love hot topics. You mentioned Uganda, Austria.
Yeah.
I love that you said that they are very similar. I would love to know in which way.
Yeah.
And how did you divide your life between both places? Where did you live mainly?
So I grew up. I was born and I grew up in Austria.
Okay.
But my mom and actually my dad too. My parents were both very conscious about raising us as Austrian Ugandans, right? So we were always very conscious of our Ugandan heritage, and we'd go there, once every year, once every 2 years, depending. Our grandparents were there, and then eventually later on my sister moved there, so we had a really strong anchor and would go back frequently. The ways that they're different is, Vienna, I think again this year got voted as like the world's most livable city. It is an incredible city. It is absolutely picturesquely beautiful. It has culture dripping from, every corner. It's practical, right? I always describe it as being like big enough to be a cosmopolitan city and small enough to be practical to get around.
Yes.
It's incredible. Like every flower bed in the middle of any random road is beautifully taken care of. But Austrians are not generally known for being the warmest and and openly most openly friendly people in the world. So flip that to Kampala, which is sort of my other home, I guess, is a classically sprawling city lacking a lot of infrastructure and certainly a developing city, but it is one of the warmest and most inviting cultures you'll ever see in the world, right? So that's like the kind of interesting, ironic, obvious differences. And then the way I sort of perceive them as being very similar is, no matter whether you go to a small town in rural Austria or a small town in rural Uganda, like the foundation of the gossip is the same, right? Like it's all we're in the end we're all just human. Yeah, so.
100%.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your sister is back in Uganda now.
No, she had moved back there for I think almost I think it's over 10 years. But she recently moved to Hong Kong.
All right.
Yeah, she moved to Hong Kong just about half a year ago now.
All right, super
which is
cool.
Amazing, yeah. So
But
I have my sister here.
If you have to, let's say, call one place home, or if imagine that there is no need to work, no need to do anything, and looking at the next 40 years and everything that has to do with society, economics, opportunities, well-being, which one would you go to?
That's a hard question. Here, I caved in to give you Biggie or Tupac, but here I'll hold to the fact that these are both my homes. This is how I was raised, I will always answer when someone's like, oh, where are you from? I'll always say I'm from Austria and Uganda. It's definitely both my spaces. Now, the other thing that's in your question that's interesting is, if I were to pick the place to be for the next, I don't know where it would be.
Yeah, no, it's the million,
world, right?
It's the $1 million question. It's a $1 million question.
Exactly.
I met a gentleman in Modena. My wife is from Modena.
Yeah.
A few years back, and he would spend every year 6 months in Uganda. He went there for 25 years ago to do certain business that I don't know of.
Yeah.
And he loved it so much that he decided to spend half a year there, and he would only go back to Italy because his family was in Italy. He was super in love with his life over there. Now this was my angle, because I thought you might have said Uganda, because I have a very pessimistic view on what will happen to Europe in the next 20, 30 years. And I'm trying to look for suggestions on where to move next.
Well, I mean, one suggestion which goes against many things I believe in, because, I'm not a big fan of cruise ships as a principle, and I'm not a big fan of tax evasion. But there's this ship I don't know if you've heard about it. There's this like ship that like rich people can step on. It's like basically a tax evasion cruise. So it never spends enough time in any given jurisdiction to trigger, any given respective tax law. So you can just live on this cruise ship and basically encircle the world, year in, year out. So that's maybe a suggestion that has a logical basis to it, but it's probably one of the most awful places you could live in as well. Yeah.
I mean, are the no? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I wanted to check it out on the internet because I think it would have been fantastic to find it. I don't think I have enough money to access this small elite.
But I would certainly
look
target
into
population.
It. Yeah, no, but I've never been on a cruise ship. I find them horrendous.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I believe to be extremely untasteful. How do you end up hating everyone that is on that cruise after only 6 months? Imagine just living there.
Literally. Also, cruise ships are basically the only thing that are worse to travel on than a plane, right? So environmentally, they're also awful.
Worse than a plane?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean,
you move a lot of people, but it's still just relatively speaking the amount of energy you're putting in to move those people. Plus the fact that most cruise ships are just, it's like a pleasure thing, right? So you're not like functionally moving people from A to B. It's, it's like
if you took maybe, I don't know, 15 days on holidays and you just spend it on business class.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
But, as a feat of engineering, they still fascinate me, right? When I see a cruise ship in a harbor, I think it's like, it's insane, right? Like this thing, I have an engineering background, you do as well, right? It's like you sort of understand the fundamental principles, but still when you see a massive cruise ship, you're like, how's that thing floating, right? Like it's crazy. And then you see the inside pictures of them with the big atriums and the massive theaters and this kind of stuff, and you're like, I just don't understand.
Water fucking parks.
Yes.
They have water parks.
Correct.
Which is...
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's good that I had never thought of a cruise ship because it's never on my radar as something against sustainability, but it is kind of obvious, yes. But since we did a segue into the topic, I believe that one of the problems for mainstream media and social media and everyone conscious in this world is that we don't define things properly. So we use words, and if you ask people what does it really mean, we have a hard time. So how can we define sustainability in a broad way first, to then narrow it down to go into detail?
So like the kind of classic definitions always roll around something about sustainability being like our ability to sort of thrive and continue thriving in the future, right? But the way that I really internalize sustainability, and this again is slightly out of character. I should stop disclaiming. Maybe this just means it's in character. It's very egoistic. Is actually sustainability is about us, right? Often when you think about sustainability, you're like, oh, it's like us and nature, and like we gotta protect nature, and we gotta protect the planet, and there's this sort of relationship to thinking about humans, and then this environment or ecosystem around humans. But actually, ultimately, sustainability, as we think about it and define it, is about our survival on this planet. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to ask me one sentence, it's about our survival on this planet. The planet will survive, right?
Yes.
Sure. If we heat it too high, and unfortunately, a lot of a number of endangered species disappear, and we change our ecosystem, and or we just obliterate ourselves in nuclear war, like the point is the planet as it exists will still stand, right? And it'll recorrect, and it will reestablish, and it'll regrow, and it'll regenerate, and it'll do all the beautiful things that it's done actually in its history, right? So sustainability ultimately is a very selfish principle, right? It is about our survival on this planet.
Yes.
Or our survival as a species if you subscribe to our ability to also colonize other planets.
Yes, I'm a little bit of a speciesist in a sense that I think it's very important what you said. When you focus on the planet, and some people I think they do it on a with a virtue signaling. I hate virtue signaling philosophy. Is, I'm being altruistic. I don't care about myself. I just the trees and the beach and everyone. No, 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 no. My view is, imagine that you have a family and you have, there's not going to be food for 10 years, and you have a warehouse in which you have supplies for you and your family, and maybe, the next generation for 10 years. And you have enough. But then you decide to throw a party one day and you spend fucking half of it.
Yep.
Yeah. That's one way in which we could see sustainability.
Yeah.
I like the definition of using resources today to meet our needs without compromising our survival in the future.
Yeah.
So again, it's a matter it's a matter of meeting our needs without putting at danger the needs in the future. So yeah,
Right.
I'm aligned with this.
Right. But and again, I think that the kind of operative word there is our. Right.
Yeah.
This is kind of uncomfortable sometimes for us to admit, especially within the context of discussion of sustainability. But it is that is actually a self-centric statement, right?
And I think the problem with
a self-centered statement.
with
Sorry.
the green movement for long has been the humanization of the world, like treating the world. Oh, we need to protect the world. No, no, it should be more inward looking. We need to think about ourselves and how we can thrive. And thrive also means, being more resourceful in the future, like and being in a sustainable way. So that's a topic very interesting, which clashes a little bit, in my view, with the degrowth movement that I oppose, though they are not fully aligned, and it's very interesting.
No, I love it.
I'm very interested in talking about the degrowth, but we get to that a little bit later. So, okay, in another way, I think we have set a definition, at least in this room, in this table, that we can work with. Then what different aspects we should focus more when it comes to sustainability? Let's say you yesterday on the phone, you made a categorization that for me was very interesting. What do we want to use that? Do we want to, let's say, separate maybe in other different segments?
Sure. So I can kind of introduce that too. I think ultimately it's kind of what Filippo was saying, right? It's our relationship to the ecosystem that we exist in and the resources that we use from the ecosystem, right? That's the kind of flowery big definition, but I hold to it, right? It's like we give and we take this ecosystem, and it's about that relationship, right? And then I think if you sort of look at maybe kind of colloquial understanding of sustainability, plus I added in here a lens of like design, as we were discussing about design yesterday. I feel like, we sort of progressed from thinking about sustainability as a very like material thing, right? Like what are things made of? How are things made? Right? And we've sort of certainly developed that into a thinking more at kind of stakeholders and services, right? It's like, okay, things are more than just products. Similar to if I track this like in design, right? We started thinking about the iPhone at the beginning. Then we started thinking about all the services that exist around the iPhone. We started thinking about Airbnb and Uber, and these are not product things. They're a higher order. And now we're sort of at the stage, really, I think, in both realms, in the design realm and the sustainability realm, where we're thinking about systems, right? Is like, how do we design better systems? And that's not only from the perspective of sustainability, but that it also exists in the perspective of design and engagement, right? So I kind of like to think about this progression, or you kind of described it as a pyramid as well yesterday, which is moving on from just thinking about the kind of material impacts of things to really, today we think about the kind of system level impacts, right?
Yes.
I like your questions because you said, let's try to prioritize what is sustainability. What we talk about right now is environmental sustainability.
Yeah.
We have not mentioned a single time social sustainability.
Yes.
Correct.
So, like when you do the social transition from carbon intensive economy to decarbonization, this has an impact on people that rely on carbon and works on money.
Huge.
So you see, sustainability is so complex. There are so many points. How do we need to prioritize though? Do we need to think that there are topics within sustainability that are more important than others? I think that's something also quite interesting.
It is a really interesting question. Like, this is maybe not the best way to answer it, but let me just like kind of start it for the sake of conversation, right? I've thought about this exact question a lot from like, say, the perspective of my own career, right? I'm like, okay, objectively, if I care about these things and like, let's say, you know, I have the privilege of having tools and experiences to also try to like address some of these things, where do I start? What's the most important thing? What's the highest priority I should work on, right? And like, that's like not, I don't know that that's necessarily the best way to approach the problem, right? Like, if I give that objective answer, if I say I'm an engineer that cares about sustainability, probably the answer is something to do with investing my time in development of renewable energy, right? This is kind of the underlying fabric. Any solution effectively we need in a relatively industrialized economy to continue relies on having, if in many cases, an infinite supply of renewable energy, right? And so you're like, cool, that's probably objectively where I should, direct my energy. But I also believe that, you know, you do your best work at the intersection of, you know, what's important, what you care about, what you're good at. And, you know, I know, Filippo, you have an interesting definition on passion, but let me just use that word for a second and say, you know, what you're passionate about. And so I think, to me, sustainability is not necessarily only about this idea of like ultimate prioritization of what is the biggest thing we need to do and let's do that first. It's about being able to adopt the principles of, you know, of prioritizing sustainability in anything that we do, right?
Yes.
If you're a baker, you know, go and adopt the principles there, right? If you run a big, bad oil and gas company, start thinking about the principles there too, right? It exists, the sort of that idea of relationship with our ecosystem, our resources, our environment, society, communities, that needs to transcend everything we do. Right, so I don't necessarily think about it as just a prioritization game. Right?
It is very interesting, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want to bring this topic because I think it has relevance to what you were saying. During our phone conversation yesterday night, I mentioned that if I care about sustainability, the main reason for it is that I think is basic politeness, just respect to whoever is next to you. When I was a small kid, my parents, I remember, it's still somewhere in my library in Spain, they gave me a good manners. How you should behave on the table, how you should behave when talking to someone older, and I think is the most beautiful thing that you can do, because when you have good manners is no other than, you know, societal code to show respect to the other.
Yeah.
And to not overpass someone's boundaries. The problem is that, you know, because of a way more interconnected world that we live in, those boundaries have been redefined, and of course the dangers, the challenges are new. For whatever reason, at least I'm not aware of, there is not a 21st century version of that good manners book of how should we behave to be respectful to one another. I think nowadays we confuse being connected to actually being a member of society, being civil. So I think it would be very interesting to try to write, and I throw this challenge because maybe we could do it together because we have a lot of free time. To write a code of good manners in 2024. The good manners of 2030. How we would like our kids to behave, not because they want to say, hey, you know, I'm nice because, you know, I do these things and I'm going to post them there. No, you do them without posting because it's just the way you need to behave.
I like this idea you introduce as like kind of, you know, manners. It exists on it's like a social code. It's a thing we all agree on.
Yes.
Right. And you're right that we don't maybe have that social code when it comes to the topic of sustainability, right? It's like there's fundamental things we all understand, right? But also I think a huge part of the problem is that we are increasingly disconnected from this ecosystem that we're meant to be very conscious of how we're using and how we're engaging with, right?
Yes.
And I'm not suggesting, you know, I'm like you, Filippo, right? I don't believe in the degrowth movement in the sense that, you know, I don't believe we should all just become, you know, kind of hippie farmers and move back to the pasture, right? That's not what I mean about reconnecting with their ecosystem. But, you know, we live now in a kind of chicken nugget society where like you there's so many layers between what we consume, what we use, how we that and the resource or the system or the natural principle that it came from, that like it's very easy to lose that code of manners, right?
Yes.
Because you don't even if I don't pick up the plastic wrapper on the street, like I don't think about the high systemic implications of what that means along the line, right? Like I don't have that relationship. I don't need to care, right? I live in this super comfortable like industrial society where I don't need to care about that.
Yeah, I don't know. You find situations when there is not a general code and only just plastic straw campaigns that make you feel good. I see some very weird paradoxes around me. So there is this girl that one time started following me a couple of months ago on Instagram. I'm not going to say the name. I don't really know her, but I followed back. She does photography and I did follow her back. And I have been seeing how she's extremely conscious when it comes to social problems.
Yeah.
And how much she thinks about the equilibrium of this planet is crazy. But she's been to Bali 4 times this year.
Yeah.
She went back and forth 4 times this year.
Yeah.
This is what really I don't know if you saw the color of my skin. Because I feel I became a little bit redder, and this is what to me it pisses me off, and I think it makes a lot of people feel like, okay, that is the narrative of someone that I cannot respect because they're full of shit.
Yeah.
Solving this conundrum is I think it's the huge challenge that we need to solve, our generation, more than finding the renewable energy. There will be an Elon Musk that has more resources to do that than us. We need to focus on the small, maybe.
So I hugely agree with you. I call it the kale salad problem, right? It's like, I have kale salad every lunch, but then I go to Bali 6 times a year for my retreat, right? Like that's this conundrum that you present and this paradox you present, right? And like, to be honest, I'm not going to sit on a pedestal here, right? I am part of that paradox, right? Is I do things to try and live more sustainably in my life, right? I've cut down a lot of my meat consumption. I'm trying in every realm that I can to control some of the elements that I have. For instance, in Hong Kong, you can buy renewable energy certificates through your energy supplier. But like there's that's laced in all sorts of controversies as well. We can undo that. But I also love stepping on a plane, right?
Yep.
I'll talk specifically what sort of my view is on the paradox in aviation. But like I think there's maybe, to simplify it, 2 types of people within that paradox, right? They're the ones who are aware and the ones that aren't aware.
Yep.
I don't know who's worse, right? I don't know whether it's worse if you're aware that your 4 flights to Bali are your actual environmental crime and you still take it, or whether you are so wrapped up in your in your kind of like lentil vegan diet that you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know that actually the biggest issues in your life are your uninsulated house and your and premium economy flights that you step on, right?
Yeah.
I don't know who is the better person in that in that spectrum, and I have to entirely admit I'm a hypocrite in that sense, right? Which is I have increasingly high awareness of many of the issues. I think for me, the way that I direct that is I say, okay, I've got to work on them, right? Like
yes.
I've got to work on trying to help fix this stuff, right? Because fundamentally, and again, we can unpack this a little bit in a second, but like if I take the case of flying, fundamentally, I believe in the values of flying too, right?
Yes. Let's go to flying because I really wanted to make another question, but we can leave it for the post data, for the epilogue of this episode. But I don't want to wait a minute longer without saying the A350. When I was working in Airbus military as an intern,
Hey, you recognize the
this
plane,
was this was no, actually I saw the box. So but
No,
but
okay,
but
okay,
no, but
yeah.
I can notice from the pilot window and
Yeah.
and the shape and
Well done.
the wing tips or the lack of wing tips. This was about to get out.
You speaking about aviation.
Yeah, man. You're actually an aerospace engineer, right? Yeah.
No, I'm
It's like another Fernando that comes to life. And I look at the tips on fire like,
No, I'm the fakest aerospace engineer, and I'm a little bit ashamed.
Hey, join the hypocrisy. It's called.
No, let me share with you and with everyone something that is a little bit embarrassing. When I finally graduated, I didn't go to pick up my, the big paper with a, nice grammage that they give the saying that you are an aerospace engineer, because I felt a little bit ashamed and I didn't give a crap. And they called me after a couple of years, like, you didn't even pick up, you didn't come to the ceremony, you didn't pick up the title. And so I did go to pick up the title, and I went home and gave it to my mom and said, "You pay for the university. I think it's yours," because
you keep this.
I don't consider myself an aerospace engineer anymore. I do say it every now and then because I think it's cool, and it's a very big word, aerospace, and especially in Spain, we normally refer to aeronautica, because under aeronautical, we historically everything was in that group. Now aerospace, because everyone is looking at the space is more famous now. So yeah, I'm fake, but I like it, and I'm still fascinated, and I like that I understand how these things move. But I've always seen them as something that they're good for society because they have united the world, but they are an ecological problem.
Yeah. So, let me unpack this in a few ways, and all this is going to sound rehearsed and cheesy, but this is entirely true, right? So I fell in love with planes. Basically, this goes back to my story, my Austrian-Ugandan side, right?
Yeah.
So I fell in love with planes basically on the first flight I can remember, which was a flight to Uganda. It was a British Airways 747. Like, fell in love with the whole thing. This is the time where you could still enter the cockpit as a kid during the flight, and they'd give you little logbooks and stuff. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Didn't sleep for the whole flight. And I remember to kind of remember the experience. I took everything that was in the little seat pocket in front of me. I took that out and took it with me. And this started this collection of airline magazines and airline timetables I have now, which is I think I have over 2,000 from all sorts of different airlines around the world and this kind of stuff. So I started getting obsessed with planes. I had more airline timetables on my bookshelf as a kid than I had actual books.
Nice.
And sort of as kind of, years ago, and I think about this problem now is, yes, I fundamentally believe in what you just said, right? If I think about the kind of tenets of the globalized economy that we live in, I'm not saying globalization is without issue, but they're tenets I believe in, right? It's kind of the internet, global shipping and aviation that kind of tie the world together. And particularly in a time where we're experiencing more and more separation, I think these things can do a lot of good for the world in terms of helping us explore and connect and realize that our two villages halfway across the world are actually the same thing. To me, the thing that gets me up in the morning, and again, this sounds cheesy, but this is absolutely true, is sustainable aviation to me is not fundamentally about getting the kind of rich banker to fly to Hong Kong to Tokyo in a better way. It's a good thing. It's a good side thing. That banker is probably also more willing and able to pay that in the short term. But the way that I think about this is that if you look at, for example, the African continent, right? So 1.2 billion in population or so, endless possibilities, a young population as well. Currently, the entire continent is responsible for 2% of global air traffic, right? 2%. And so once you have a more open sort of African skies, right? So this once you facilitate more flying in Africa, we could talk about what that means as well. You're going to see massive growth on that continent, and you're going to see things that don't exist today, which are Air Asias and Ryanairs, and you're going to see connections, cheaper connections between Kinshasa and Johannesburg and Lagos and Nairobi and all sorts of interesting places in between. And to me, that's what it's about, right? Is like, yes, I personally have this love for flying and I want to resolve my own hypocrisy, right?
Yeah.
But fundamentally, sustainable aviation to me is, in the context also of growth and degrowth, is about being able to grow the benefits of what this thing lets you do in a way that, you know, we're not fundamentally ripping the world apart and our ability to survive in it, right? So that's like kind of, that's how I view the puzzle. It's also a very interesting puzzle, right? This particular, like an aircraft, and for those listening, I'm pointing to an aircraft right now. We have
You can show it to them, to the camera. Those listening, please just take the phone out of your pocket and connect to our Wi-Fi, because this part is extremely interesting.
No, I mean, not really. I'm just pointing to an aircraft. But this thing is also, it's such an interesting, it tells you about all the challenges of sustainability. And then we can unpack all of these, right? One challenge of aircraft, of aviation, is that there's no single solution to enabling sustainable aviation, right? We don't have a golden or a silver bullet opportunity that says just switch A to B and then we're all good, right? Another thing that I think is hugely fundamental, and this is what I want to talk about a lot too, is you cannot perceive and feel the benefits of sustainable aviation, right? If I make the engines on this A350 25% more efficient, I don't feel that. If I make the aircraft lighter, I don't feel it, right? If and so I think this is actually one of the biggest challenges in sustainability is we're disconnected from progress. There's a lot of work being done, and actually Filippo could probably speak to this better than I can, right? On tracking our progress towards sustainability, whether it's at, you know, company level or, you know, at a broader level in society. But the real challenge to me is that you can't feel or perceive, you know, the outcomes of what we invest in. You can't feel and perceive the benefits. We can't say that we're getting better, right? And so that's encapsulated also in the challenge of sustainable aviation, right? Is you can't actually feel when you're flying more sustainably, right?
I mean, the only incentive that airlines really nowadays have, apart from ESG principles that, you know, big companies need to follow, is the cost of fuel. Let's say the economical part is really the only stimuli that can really make companies, make Rolls-Royce, make faster engines that, you know, I mean, and it is getting better. You know, before we used to go across the Atlantic with 4 engines. Now it's only 2, but still it's a lot. Now, what angle can we take on this? Because at the end of the day, yes, again, we can do things that are not perceivable by the consumer, so they need to be imposed by policy.
Yes and no. Like, that's the obvious conclusion, and that is absolutely true, right?
Okay.
I think that across, let me move away from planes for just a second, right? There's a whole host of other things that we need to do that fall into the same problem, right?
Yes.
Like, let me take, like, the golden example is insulation in your home. Like, the single best thing, okay, eat your kale salad, don't fly to Bali, and then the next thing you do is insulate your home, right? That is like the unsexiest possible thing you could think of, right?
Okay.
But insulating your home, buying double pane windows is just fundamentally going to reduce your heating and your cooling load. Heating and cooling, or the energy we use to heat and cool, is one of the largest single categories of contributors to emissions, right? That's like, you just got to do it, right? And similarly, it falls into the same bucket where you're like, well, if I can't really activate a consumer to do it because it's like really unsexy, right?
Yes.
Imagine giving your wife, like, I don't know, home insulation as a Christmas gift. Then you're like, okay, well, it must be policy. But I think that there are really amazing opportunities in design, in using capitalist forces to try and get people closer to the impact of the decisions they can make. And yes, to make things like insulation more sexy, right?
Okay.
The sort of way I look at the world today is we spent a lot of time arguing about like the fundamental science of sustainability, and generally speaking, plus or minus, we all kind of mostly agree now. Most major institutions that matter in the world generally agree on the fundamental science. Climate change is happening. It's real. Great. Or not great. We now have more movement at the policy level, right? much more needed, much more coordination needed as well between nations. But I feel like what we're missing is that actually sustainability is also one of the most exciting opportunities for this layer in the middle, which is the layer to be just creative, right? Is we need creative, ingenious new solutions. And again, we can use the capitalist machinery that, sells us and produces, millions of iPhones every year. Like, I think there's an opportunity to direct that machine at creative solutions in the middle, right? And we only have very few examples that people kind of colloquially understand that exist in the middle. And one of them is Tesla. We can unpack that and talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. No. Please continue, because in fact, that the provocation was whether we make the decision of saying, okay, we really need maybe military force by superior countries.
Yeah.
Meaning that if the U.S. decides, if the 60% of the population in the U.S. decides that this is something that we care a lot about, they have the military to impose everyone, or maybe almost everyone here, or where we are, maybe they would be a little bit in disagreement, and that other part is the part that really interests me. So if you had, let's say, a lot of decision power in your hand, which are the steps we take now?
So don't get me wrong, I fundamentally believe in the need and the power and the necessity. I said the need and necessity of policy, right? Of the top-down drive, right? Ultimately, that's what's going to shift the needle, particularly in difficult or unsexy topics that you need to that we need to address sustainability in. But let me take Tesla for example. My disclaimer to start with: Tesla is not a perfect environmental actor. Most people don't buy Teslas for their environmental credentials, and Tesla, the Tesla's initial growth particularly was also fueled by top-down incentives, right?
Yes.
Tax incentives, etc. But I think what's special about Tesla is that it is an example of a thing you can do that feels and sounds and tastes and it feels better, right? It feels like you are making you can understand the contribution that you're making as an individual, right, toward a better decision, right? I think Tesla, to me now, it can cease to exist tomorrow, and it's done its job, right? Which is, it was the fly that shook the bull. It changed the industry in the sense it showed you could make a desirable and perform an electric car. And now, if you look at any car show, in the last 5 years, it's all about like the executives of BMW and Volkswagen standing there being like, "Oh, we have an electric roadmap too, and here's what we're going to do over the next 5 years," right?
Yes.
So they fundamentally showed it was possible, and I think that it is a really interesting example of where kind of top down meets bottom up, right?
Yeah.
Because again, the initial kind of drive, pun intended, towards EVs was in most economies was driven through incentives, through tax incentives mostly, but also it was a way to engage the consumer directly in a decision that is toward sustainability. And it's wrapped in this sexy, different body that looks and feels different than other cars at the time, right? That's really cool. And I think it's a nice template for me to think about in other categories, right? We can talk a little bit what that means, towards aviation, but Filippo's nodding his head, so I feel like he wants to say something too.
I just a couple of comments.
Yeah.
I agree with most of what you said about insulation of apartment. We know in Europe right now, because of the crisis with Ukraine and Russia, the energy bills,
Yes.
shoot up in the past few years. So that was a lot of us realized our energy bill is so expensive.
Yeah.
We need to find different solution. And now this solar and other energy are finally cheaper than renewable energy, are cheaper than fossil fuel. It makes sense. It's a market-driven force. So that's my first point. So even insulation of apartment is sexy. What is not sexy is the externalities. The idea that I bought a can of Coke today, how is it going to be disposed in the future? I'm not going to see that. So that's the problem. The last point, I really appreciate that you touch upon Tesla and how Tesla approach the issue. They make it sexy, a sustainable product sexy. This is where I have a beef with sustainable meat and lab meat because they are trying to compete on something that they cannot make sexy. You cannot make a vegetarian burger as sexy as a real one. You need to make different products. There are vegetarians and they can compete with a burger, but not the same, product. And that's what Tesla did. You said we are gonna make cars better. And
Yes.
And by the way, right? Yeah,
it's gonna be sustainable, of course, if you use energy that was produced from
Right.
renewable sources.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
In fact, let's say these new fine dining restaurants that are vegetarian, vegan, they don't do fake meat. They do
Exactly.
new stuff.
Yeah.
Because we should adapt to different type of diet. It doesn't make any sense to pretend to have a substitution to your carnivore diet if you to feel better about the planet, about the animal emissions. You just should eat less meat and change your
The
mindset about it. Yeah.
So it's true. Like there's I listened to I think it was How I Built This with the founder of Impossible Meat, and one little clue helped me understand this game a lot better, right? Which he said the primary target market, at least initially, right, of Impossible Beef, was not the vegan. It was the meat eater, right? And so the pitch is that if you have the carnivore who is like, you know what, I love my burger, I can't get rid of my burger. If you provide them an option that says, hey, still have your burger, but here's a more responsible choice. By the way, it's not a health choice by any means, right? It's just technically, systemically a more environmentally conscious choice. That is their target customer. And the example he gave is, this is how they built traction at the time. That traction has dropped now a little bit. But at the time, they built traction in Burger King, right? Because it's entirely the customer, right? They want to get the customer who walks into a Burger King. A vegan doesn't really walk into a Burger King, right? A 2024 vegan at least. And says, I want a more responsible choice in this environment, right? That's kind of what the product is designed for. Of course, then, they need to grow their market and they need to make investors happy. And I think that message spreads further and wider and says, hey, buy your Impossible Meat at the supermarket now and use it in your everyday cooking. But the genesis of it was as an alternative for meat eaters. And I think that actually is quite interesting to me, right? As a solution product in that space.
Another problem that I see, and I totally agree with what you just said. I totally see your point. But how do we convince people, especially with nowadays channels of information? Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to education, information, visibility. It is not sexy to talk about what happens to that Coca-Cola can after you drink it. We should have the power to communicate what happens. But nowadays, everyone lives in their echo chambers. So the meat eater, it would be very weird that he stumbles upon this podcast and maybe changes their view.
Yeah.
And probably, there is no good solution nowadays, not good reply to this question. But how do we break this vicious circle of, us trying to convince people that are already convinced, and stepping over the line to the people that really don't even spend time thinking about these things.
Yeah. Or back to your, the Instagram follower you were talking about, who maybe think about these things but are misinformed, right? Or maybe aren't like, maybe I'm giving her more credit than she needs. But I agree with you. That is the $1 million question. And that's the hardest thing. And I still establish the hardest thing is the lack of tangibility. That is the hardest thing. I can, to most informed consumers who maybe even have an inkling or want to learn more, I can throw them, 25 research papers on a relevant topic, and there'll be science now that backs up most decisions roughly that we need to make, right? Sustainability is never black and white, by the way. We always know there's shades of gray in between, but I can inform myself about most subjects I need to learn about, right? But the problem is still, like, even if I don't know, start learning more about the end of life of a Coke can, right? It's so I'm so removed and it's so intangible to me to make a better decision and connect myself to that better decision, right? And so I draw toward, again, companies. I'm thinking a little bit more from the bottom up. That what I call them protagonists, and we've talked about two, right? We've talked about Tesla, we've talked about sort of Impossible and Beyond, and none of these are perfect. Again, I'm not in any way implying anytime that these things are perfect. But other examples are Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's, Natura in Brazil. There's companies that exist to demonstrate how you can do something differently. Yep. This is to me, this is what I get excited about, and the way that I can kind of compute this problem, right, is like it's impossible to move the needle all at once at the beginning. It's impossible to change Coca-Cola from day one. It's impossible to shift everyone to electric cars, right? Those things are objectively true. It's impossible to do all those things. So like the way you can either end up in that there's two ways you can end up in that situation. You can end up a massive pessimist, right? Because you say it's not possible, or you just, you give up, right? Maybe that's the same thing. But I tend to be drawn very strongly towards examples of what I call, again, protagonists of they generally start as small players, but they exist in their relevant industries to show how it can be done differently. You know that when the Nike team sits together and discusses sustainability, the first thing they talk about is Patagonia, right? And they talk probably about how you can emulate some of what Patagonia is doing, learn from what they're doing. How can we scale it into what we do today? Like, that's the fundamental of the conversation. That's the conversation in Volkswagen, right? Yes. That's the conversation that relevant balance is the conversation in many other industries. And so that's the kind of, like, I love that because to one of like the things you're getting at, right? Those companies, they tend to try and show that it can be done differently. They don't talk, they show. They're never perfect. They never have perfect environmental credentials, right? If you read a Patagonia sustainability report, more so at the beginning, less so now, they're becoming a little bit of a larger beast. But the narrative is one of like, we're not perfect, but we're getting better, right? And here's kind of how we're going to get better, and here's like what we're trying to do. And so it's like, that's the way I feel like you should approach these things. What's really difficult in sustainability at the moment is like the stakes are so high, right? Like, it's our survival on the planet or whatever. It's this big pressure we feel that's on us that, we don't give ourselves the room to really experiment or say that, it's okay to try something and get it wrong, or, that's like a feeling we have in the tech world, right? It's like iterate, try, make it better, iterate, try, make it better. In many sustainability endeavors, it feels like an all or nothing, right? It feels like you got to solve everything at once, and you've got to be have perfect integrity and get everything right. And the truth is, like, we know nothing really works that way. And these like little protagonist companies, I feel, are ones that are kind of risk takers in the sense, and quite honest about what they do, right?
I agree. I think I love those companies that you mentioned. It makes me think that Elon Musk is even more important than I already consider him to be, because Patagonia will sell to people that are already a little bit predisposed for that message. Yes. But the amazing thing about Elon Musk is because of, I don't know, how punk he is, how outrageous he is, how he can avoid giving a fuck about political correctness. He reaches a certain, let's say, center-right or deep Republican audience in the United States, while being extremely liberal, if you think about it. So I think, I want to say something in public that I say in private to whoever wants to listen to me. I think that if we give the fucking Nobel Prize to Obama while he was bombing, we should give at least 3 Nobel Prizes to Elon Musk, because he's done everything he does is extremely important. I hadn't seen this angle until you were talking. I hadn't thought about it, but man, Tesla doesn't need any comment. SpaceX, which is, I mean, he is landing rockets. We are talking now as if it was something normal. 20 years ago, it was something that was considered not possible.
Correct.
And he was
the private sector,
and he's doing it economically.
Yes.
Because he's spending his own money.
Not only economically, he's doing it. It's like it's a factor of it's like 5x cheaper or something than a rocket launch on SpaceX at the moment than it is.
Exactly.
For equivalent cargo on another platform, right?
He's doing Neuralink, which is a different story. And what's the internet thing?
Starlink.
Starlink, Neuralink, Starlink, which can be the driving force for broadcasting information and allowing people from maybe Central Africa to catch up in terms of education and access to the keys for progress, as if you were living in Iowa, for example. On the perpetual aim to improve, even though maybe we don't get to the perfect 100% solution. I totally agree. I'll share with you my view even on politics. When I discuss about maximal systems, we haven't spent a lot of time together, but we have discussed a lot, Filippo and I. I'm a total libertarian.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit like Javier Milei in Argentina. Actually, I like a lot Javier Milei. Shout out to him. I would love to actually interview you.
You're just trying to get you're trying to increase likes on your podcast now, right?
No. I know a lot of people will probably unsubscribe, but I really like the guy.
Shout out to Taylor Swift again as well.
Yes, please, everyone come here. And but in real life, I'm a social democrat. I'm a social democrat because I think you need to come down to compromises, and there is what I think, there is what you think, and I'm gonna always try to gain that 1%. But maybe the libertarianism is not the perfect solution because it lives in a sort of way in a utopia. But walking towards it brings progress. So only having the clear direction, it's already a big step forward. Now, big problem when it comes to this is what do we do with developing countries? Because you mentioned before that Africa represents, I didn't know the number, so thank you for bringing it up, 2% of global aviation.
2% of global air traffic.
Global air traffic. What if now someone that is 10 years old in Uganda listens to us? I mean, we are not saying that, but listens to someone saying, we need to cut down on certain emissions that are bad because it's bad for the environment. We did it 60 years ago and we developed ourselves, but now you cannot do it because it's your turn. How can we avoid that? Maybe there is no perfect answer for this either.
I mean, it kind of gets back to Filippo teed this up at the beginning, and I agree with it, right? And again, I'm being a known hypocrite. I'm asking to have my cake and eat it too, right? I don't believe that it is fair or right or just, right, to limit the opportunity for economic development in that sense, right? But I think that the classic way to look at this, and you mentioned already, is to say there's the opportunity for leapfrogging, right? So if a better solution exists already, and you have a situation where that solution's being introduced for the first time or an early time, you have the opportunity to just do it better, right? And one thing that excites me when you look at, let me just take the Sahara region and the Saharan nations, right? Is if you think about the possibility for like changing global dynamics, right? One massive resource they have is the sun. And there's a lot of exploration in both fundamental science and then in politics about how you could explore that region becoming a net exporter of energy, of renewable energy. And that sort of stuff's interesting to me, right? Because then, those nations could be nations that, for example, could produce green hydrogen very cheaply and fuel hydrogen-powered planes. That was a bit of a tongue twister. That's the kind of my nirvana way to look at it, right? Is there's opportunities for just doing it better. Do I believe realistically that's going to happen, right? Given the emotions of the world today? No, right? It's going to take progressive leadership for that to be true. but like at a fundamental level, that's kind of what I'm excited about, right? I think, back to Musk really quickly. The thing that excites me about Musk is that he works basically he just works off first principles in science, right?
Yes.
The entire genesis of Tesla is just saying, okay, what is the most efficient way we can do road transportation? The most efficient way we can do road transportation is using electric motors powered by batteries, and like you invest in that idea before it's conceivable to do so. Like, I have respect for that. One thing that makes me uncomfortable about Elon Musk is we've written his biography before he's finished his work, right? So we don't quite know where he's going to go yet, but like that first principles approach to sustainability is, if we strip everything away for a second, like, what is the best thing to do? What is the most efficient thing to do? What is the best way to structure the system, right? Electric car powered by solar and wind. Like, let's build that. Right?
Yeah.
If you apply that to the question of, say, developing region, right, or an African nation, or let me take my Saharan example again, right? That like first principles approach is like, there's huge opportunity in that. That's what I was talking about again, right? Where like we've forgotten, sustainability got really boring, right? It became about reports and metrics, and sustainability is technically should be the most exciting time since the industrial revolution or the digital revolution, or both, right? It's a chance to reinvent and recreate and rethink, right? And it's like that kind of first principles and opportunity to leapfrog and do better.
Yeah.
That I think gives, if you structure it the right way, in my like nirvana world, gives a lot of developing countries a leg up, right? If they do it the right way. We saw this in telecommunications. We saw this in other ways.
Yeah. I have a very romantic idea about people in general. I think if left alone, people really can understand what's good for them, and
I believe
using analogies as we have in this podcast, I think people would choose the right way. Problem is,
I agree with you.
Problem is that nowadays,
you don't know what
the flow of information that people received is tainted by corporate interests. There was, I listened to it, I think 15, 20 years ago, there was an interview with a philosopher that said, going back to basic principles, and this is, for me, is the origin of the problem, no? He said, a few centuries ago, we had to separate church from state. And it seemed revolutionary. Now the challenge of today is to separate economy from state. And if you do that, and then this is basic principles, and then again, I don't have the answer on how to do this, apart from investing in education, which is something that, in my opinion, is the contrary of what we are doing, even in the developed world, by the way. Because all of these new technologies and having iPads on the classrooms and everything, for me, they are distractions from the main principles. But only by doing that, then we will allow people to make these choices, to actually say, okay, maybe we need to, for example, the best thing for Spain, in my opinion, would be to cut down on certain policies and to invest in education, and maybe even invest in the education of Morocco, because they are our neighbors, and we want to have a civil neighboring country. This is a crazy idea. It's never going to happen because,
Doesn't sound that crazy. But it sounds crazy.
But it sounds crazy, And everyone kind of thought in this way, following Elon Musk's way of thinking, maybe we could find a solution. So actually just discussing about this and doing it publicly, and having people judging us for sure online, even though they're going to be maybe 23 or 300 or maybe 3,000, because I'm sure that I see you as an attention magnet. So I'm very happy that you're here also for this. I think we're doing something right. What about Hong Kong? I'm going to wrap up the part that I guide, and then I'm going to give the epilogue to Filippo. But I want to ask you about something local.
Wait, but before you do that, can you just say something?
Of course.
Off what you're saying, right? Is you were almost arguing first principles or education, and I entirely agree with you, right? I had this incredible opportunity, like just a few 2 weeks ago or something. A friend of mine asked whether I'd come and teach her class of 10-year-olds about sustainable aviation.
Yes.
And like, first of all, it was the most intimidating thing I've ever done, because I never taught at that level before, didn't know how much they knew. But oh my God, did I leave with such, I left with the bright eyes being like, this is the future, right? This is the questions they were asking, the way they understood the principles, the way they understood the principles of climate change, the way that they were starting to think about solutions and asking very basic questions is, why can't you do this, right? Why can't you do that? And having the ability to break down some of the silos exist. I was so inspired, right? And I believe, yep, that's how you're going to move it. I believe that I fundamentally believe in what you said too, right? Is humans will make the right choice if it's given to them, right? If they understand it and if it's given to them. I believe that fundamentally that, kids are the future, and that's like where you're going to drive a lot of change, because I also believe in human ingenuity. And I'm going to tie back to cruise ships, right? Is we can build cruise ships. Cruise ships are insane. We can build islands in the shapes of palms in Dubai, right? We can build tall buildings. We can build incredible cities and incredible infrastructure. If it's possible within the realm of physics, I believe humans can do anything. If you put the incentives in the right place, they can do anything, right? We can develop sustainable fuels we can scale sustainable fuels. We can build hydrogen-powered aircraft. We can build electric aircraft to the degrees that are possible in the physical world, and we can change systems. But we need the incentives and the drive to do so, right? And fundamentally, that's going to come out of things like just getting more people curious, aware, and driven towards changing those things, right? Yeah. And that's push the kids to do it. We need to do as much as we can. Push the kids to do it. They're going to do even better, right? We made cruise ships. We can do anything.
A cruise ship should be actually the easiest to do, because you could put a couple of nuclear power engines,
have space,
and just have them go around. But I don't know how many people would buy a cruise if they knew that they have some nuclear fuel in the. I wouldn't give a crap. I mean, if the engineers tell me that it's safe, I would do it. But I know I'm weird. I know I'm a little bit weird.
Depends how strong your drive for virtuous signaling is, right? It's like, well,
how can we avoid virtuous signaling? How can we make it untasteful?
I don't know that I believe that's a bad thing.
Okay, fair enough.
It comes back again, like if I to a degree. To a degree, I totally agree with you, right? But to a degree, if I again believe in the forces of capitalism, right? As a partial solution to this, right? Capitalism has also given us way too much crap, and is also, a lot of the source of what the challenge we find ourselves in now. But if I believe that it's important to make insulation sexy, right? Then I believe that there's a certain degree of virtuous signaling that comes with that, right? I agree that, your neighbors have nice panels, maybe I should get panels, or your neighbor's panels are nicer than mine, maybe I should get those, right? Your neighbor's electric car looks cool. Maybe I should start thinking about that decision in my life too. I feel there's a degree of virtuous signaling that comes from just using the sex appeal of design or a more kind of capitalist approach to solving some of these problems. That's probably a good thing, right?
Which I see your point, and I'm open to change my opinion. I said before I hate virtuous signaling, but now I see your angle.
But if it's overblown, or if it's based on hot air, or if it's based on again that just silly paradox of like, look how good I am, but actually I'm causing way more damage with the things you don't see, then I agree with you. That's not how we should be running a world, right?
Literally you left me speechless, because I wanted to rebate it, but then I'm running the counter replies in my head, and I see your point.
No,
because
solution.
I've always thought that stupidity was something worse than evil, but maybe not. It's a very difficult question. I was going to ask it before. Who do you think is worse, a stupid or someone mean?
It goes back to kind of what we were saying before, right? Is it worse to know what you're doing, or not worse to know, worse to not know what you're doing? I think that whoever's not open to changing their mind is the worst one, right? If you're mean but you're open to changing your perspective, you get my credit.
All right.
Because I think the most dangerous thing is the stagnance, right? So if you have a particular view of the world or a particular view of a solution or a particular allegiance that you're never willing to question, that I think is the most dangerous thing for the future of our survival on this planet, right? Societally and environmentally. Yeah.
Spot on. What do you think?
I think that communication and how we rethink communication is going to be so critical, not just in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of political discussions, in terms of depolarizing our world. You were raising some very important point about virtual signaling. Virtual signaling can be alienating. It can alienate people. Say that guy, it's really like it thinks that it's better than me. I'm gonna oppose him even more. It's the same thing that the left and Democrats do in the U.S. when they say they do virtual signaling against Donald Trump, and they call the deplorables, or I think it was the deplorables that they call it. Hillary Clinton called the deplorables the voters of Donald Trump. That's what's gonna alienate there. How do we rethink about communication in terms of politics and in terms of sustainability, so that we can actually create the table for a debate rather than smashing this table and green shaming someone because he's polluting or is not doing the right thing. So also demoralizing sustainability, it's very important. And let's bring it to the key value. What we need companies that create value, that expand the pie, expand this pie that we all want to eat. And value is sustainability, value is sexiness, value is increasing people willingness to spend for that solution compared to other solution. So I think it's all connected, but if we don't think how to reframe this debate in a more productive way, I think we are screwed.
Well, we are screwed, but we touched a lot of things, and at least to me, this today's conversation gave me a lot of things that I want to really spend time thinking about. And I am going to try to write the book of good manners,
that idea.
Which I'll share with you, and I'll share with you. If you don't want to directly collaborate and 4 or 6 hands, at least to review and give me critical points, because this is something that I started being obsessed with from the social media angle. But I think the sustainability one is probably the second pillar that we forget about.
I think the best manner, my 2 cents, is just curiosity, right? This whole question of do I know what to do right? Am I being greenwashed? Like is every sustainability decision in my purview being directed by some big bad corporation or whatnot? I think if you just have people who are curious, right, and who ask the questions, who ask, is this the best I could do? Or can I find out more about what happens to this Coke can after the end of its life? Or can I think a little bit more about where my food comes from? Or should I, be a little bit more conscious about my travel footprint, or whatever it may be? I think curiosity is one of the best manners that I can think of in this context, right?
But you need yes, and you need curiosity with foundations to understand the complex problems. The other day I had in front of me Edgar, a chef from the Epicurean group, and we share the almost recent fatherhood. So we were talking about AI and how that will influence education and the subjects that our children will study in a few years. And I said to him, in my opinion, we have to stop thinking about so much applied sciences, because so many things will be done by machines. We need to go back to the basic core subjects that our parents used to study, that I believe we were lucky to study, because more or less our age is the same. History, philosophy, within philosophy, logic, things that
theories of knowledge
create the structures in our brain to then ask the difficult questions, to then have in front of us a politician that is saying the right thing, vote. Saying stupidity,
Yeah.
we don't vote. The main problem with Trump, for example, and I'm doing this for clickbait for sure. No, but no.
Look at the camera. Yeah.
The main problem that I have with Trump is that he treats people as idiots, and he gets away with it, and that's the symptom of a sick society. And this is the key problem, you know. So yes, look, how much time do you think we've done?
Oof, actually, to be honest, I've lost.
Like this, you lost track.
For 50 minutes.
It's almost an hour and a half. So what I'm gonna do, just for because we did a 2 hour and a half the other day, and the small audience had a consensus in, you know, telling me to just keep it a little bit more brief. What I will do is, I'm going to give you the last word, because I think it's a courtesy that I like to extend to my guest. Yeah. But before that, I want to thank you. I want to thank Filippo for coming back. It's super good to have you here again. And I can say that this has been one of the most nicest conversations I had in recent times. So thank you for making it all the way here on a Sunday morning. Thank you, everyone. The sponsor is somewhere in the description. Just go there if you have to buy some alcohol. Why not? .com.hk. Ollie.
My last word is everything in sustainability seems so complex, so overwhelming to some extent, right? So difficult, so challenging. But my kind of framework, the way that I think is it easier than getting to the moon in the 60s? Or at least massively faking that we got to the moon in the 60s. And if that's true, then it means we can do it. Humans are capable of anything, of absolutely anything. If we put our minds to it, again, within the realms of physics, we are capable of anything. So that's kind of what excites me, right? Is we live in this space of needing to reinvent, rethink. And any challenge that might seem, quasi impossible, to me is not, if you just look at the history of what we've been able to do, right? So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you very much. I love the last message. It's been great. Thank you for bringing the plane. It's very nostalgic.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you, subscribe, like, comment. I speak like if I was someone important. I think I should just fucking stop saying these things.
You are important.
Enjoy. You will listen to this on a Friday, so enjoy the weekend. Thank you for staying, making it to the end. Talk soon. Ciao, ciao.